Yeah, and then we can get them in.
Well, now an attendee just fell off.
All right, are we,
Okay, the meeting is started. Let me get back over to board. Okay.
thumbs up? All right. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakota Board of Education to order today, March 12th. Adam, will you please call the roll?
Mr. D?
Here.
Ms. Casper?
Here.
Ms. French?
Here.
Mr. Horton?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here. Please join Isaac as he leads us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Adam, please call the roll.
Ms. French?
Yes.
Mr. D?
Yes.
Ms. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes. All right, we are ready to start the Ed Choice Voucher Review. I will turn this over to Dr. Whiteley, and Adam is working on getting all of our attendees in. We were lucky enough to have all three of our legislators make time for this tonight, so we appreciate that they are all Zooming in.
So on March 4th, which was our last planning meeting, we spent some time talking about vouchers in general, just being educated on that as a Board of Education, and actually our association, so our Lakota Education Association, was part of that discussion as well, with a kind of a request or kind of a at least a discussion point about us joining the local lawsuit around vouchers. And perhaps splitting that between a district and an association, because we felt that as public school entities that vouchers are a pressing matter for public schools. And as we reached the conclusion of that discussion, again, no real action item or vote or anything happened during that, but really we decided that, you know, we were talking amongst ourselves, and we did have some really good education from the kind of lawsuit entities, the association, our own working knowledge. But in that discussion, it came up that we would like to hear from our legislators themselves and have an opportunity to dialogue with them specifically around the conversation around vouchers in Ohio, and particularly how that impacts Lakota local schools, public schools in our region. And so instead of guessing what our legislators might say, we thought it would be important to invite them to the conversation. And as Ms. Schaefer said, all three were very open to the idea of joining this conversation and engaging in kind of a Q&A and back and forth, so that we could just really hear from them straight away about what their feelings are about vouchers, what are their philosophies about vouchers, and how that impacts public education, specifically, again, Lakota local schools. So kind of our format today will be to, first of all, just as our legislators come on, I will certainly introduce them, but then just have each of them talk about kind of what is their current viewpoint about vouchers. What is their current stance or feeling about just the subject in general around public schools in Ohio. And then we will do a little bit of a kind of a review of sorts. We will kind of go back and really hit those high points that came up in March 4th, not only for our own review, but for our audience members and public consumption on our videos, so that you can go back and reference those. We had a really healthy discussion, but what were those really big bullet points that we wanted to make sure that we're all fresh in our mind as we get ready to then go into the Q&A with our legislators. And then at the very end, after we engage with our legislators, we will circle back to the original question that came up on March 4th, is what is our feeling as a Board of Education, perhaps in partnership with our LEA, about really joining the legislative or the lawsuit piece around Vouchers Hurt Ohio. So there will be some kind of decision or kind of action piece at the end of the discussion. So just keep that in mind as we listen and as we engage, that our ultimate decision point would be, where do we as a Board of Education and as Lakota local schools feel in joining that Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit, and ultimately how we partner with that, perhaps with the association. So with that,
I believe we have Senator Lang and Representative Hall on the call. Are you guys able to speak? I've been trying to text to get this working out.
Technology is wonderful.
Yeah,
It works.
and Representative Gross, I didn't have her cell phone number to text with her, but I have resent the email to everybody so that they can hit the link. If anybody has her cell phone number, you might text her to check her email.
Adam, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I am here.
Oh, great. So do we have everyone?
We have George?
Do we just have her?
I think that was Tom.
I believe I see the last three of George's cell phone. Mr. Lang, can you hear us?
Talks amongst yourself.
Okay, I just sent another text, so we'll move on.
So as we're waiting for them to join, we'll kind of, like I said, we'll kind of reorder some things a little bit. So kind of starting in that review, right? All of that wonderful information and dialogue we had on March 4th, trying to capture that. We had lots of handouts. I have those in front of me, right? But we tried to consolidate those into one kind of presentation. So a combination of what we heard from our guest speakers that day, what Adam had given us from a financial perspective, really to consolidate those and put those into hopefully what is a real takeaway. So we're going to go into that review piece, and then hopefully we'll have the legislator piece on here so that we can then do the Q&A.
Okay, so we'll do the slideshow. If we could put that up on the screen, please. There we go. Okay, so as Dr. Whiteley mentioned, we started looking into this, figuring out kind of where we're at from a bigger level to see, you know, what the impact was on Lakota, and then we ended up looking at Butler County as well as the state, just to see kind of what this impact looks like. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the stats that we found when we were looking through this is the state funding goes into, it takes a base cost per pupil, which is the very top number at the top box, if you can see that, the $8,241.61. That's 100% of that base. That's what the state takes in to calculate how much per pupil is broken apart. Then if you look, I did some really, really simple math, just how many students the state's showing, how much the state totally pays. The average distribution comes out to the $5,707. Then if you look at Lakota's portion of that, we actually receive about 34% of that today in fiscal year 25, which comes out to the base funding, $2,839.15. Then if you take how many vouchers there are statewide, and you just divide that by the amount that they're planning with House Bill 96 to pay into that, that's where the $6,573.53 comes in. I wish I would have just rounded off the pennies. It would have made it a little easier. So then when you look at below, the box below, what that's reflecting is overall, if you look at the base funding and the voucher funding, that's how much House Bill 96 is showing is going toward that education piece. Of that, the vouchers makes up 11% of that. However, the voucher students makes up about 10%. So it's a little bit skewed on that. Next slide, please. So one of the resources that was sent to us, it had a really good chart that I wanted to share, which is the state average share. And as you can see in fiscal 25, where we're at right now, the state average share is coming out to 38.4%. And when the Duroff case, which that was the case that said that the state funding was non-constitutional, when that came out in fiscal year 99, the state was actually at 45.7%. So we're starting to trend down a pretty good bit from that point. And then the box below, that's just showing these data points of the state budget, how many students we have currently enrolled statewide, the Lakota numbers based on the funded ADM that we have, and then also the vouchers at the end. That's how those numbers are tying back. It was really important at the end we put reference points, because depending on what data source you look at, believe it or not, you might find a little bit of different data. So we actually used our February #2 foundation payment for this, and all that, most of this will be at the end. I might have missed a couple. I was trying to put this together quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you look at statewide, it's important, the very top bar, that's reflective of the statewide enrollment. And so as you can see, the statewide enrollment is trending down a bit. It's been doing that across the board, but you can see in fiscal year 24, that's where the non-income qualifying voucher payments really took an increase for how many was distributed when they included the Ed Choice expansion. That's what really drove that. So the bottom numbers are representative. I don't know how well everybody in the audience can see that. This is on board docs. I have attached to all of these slides on there, so you can see it there as well. But that's based on our fiscal years, and that's where you can see the large increase. So now, next slide, please. We took that and broke it apart by subgroup. So this will probably be much easier to see, I'm assuming, if you did look at it on board docs. But that shows our demographics for statewide, and it's pulling that in based on fiscal year. Okay. Next slide, please.
Sorry. Can we go back to that slide?
Sure.
Because of the coloring, I can't see, which one is the green?
The green
The
is
green,
white, non-Hispanic.
White non-Hispanic is the green bar. And all of this is just based on how the Department of Education puts that data out.
Which one is next to, I mean, the one next to the highest?
So in order, Isaac, you have, from left to right, you have Asian, and then you have African-American, non-Hispanic, then you have Hispanic, then you have multiracial, and then the big spike is white, non-Hispanic.
That's correct.
So the red one is,
The tallest bar is white non-Hispanic.
And the smallest bar is Asian, and then the second
Okay,
largest
okay.
is African-American.
Okay.
And then those two that are kind of more close in nature are Hispanic and
okay,
multiracial.
got it, thank you.
So then when we take a look at Butler County, you can see this is just the enrollment for Butler County. This shows how that increase happened. Overall, Butler County in fiscal '25 has 51,548 students being served and right around 5,400 vouchers going out. So really, when you look at statewide trends, Butler County really is trending kind of at the same level as the state overall would be, percentage-wise. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is the same chart, just broken out for Butler County as well. Next slide, please. We'll go to Lakota. And then this shows the increase for Lakota local schools. What we found was Lakota local schools is actually the 4th highest in the state on the number of vouchers that are going out. So we took a very large increase. It just doesn't show up the same way as it used to when the old funding formula would pay it in and then pass it out, so we would have to account for that. Now it's directly funded to where that's going to. So it took a little different data dive to find the information. So that's what that looks like. Then at the next slide, you'll be able to see how it's broken out with our demographic data as well.
And I think it's important, this is ours. So
This is Lakota.
very similar to kind of what we saw on the previous slides, but this is unique to Lakota local schools.
Yeah, the bars kind of are trending in the same direction. Now, next slide, please. So what we wanted to put together is how does the state measure currently if a school district meets the state standards? So essentially, you can see this is found out on the Department of Education's website. If a district, at the end of all of the factors that come in, if a district's 3 stars or more, it's considered to meet state standards. So 3 stars meet state standard, 2.5 and down is considered to not meet state standard. So that's important. We actually pulled this data in to see how the voucher distribution's happening along with state, if districts are meeting the expectations of the state per se. So next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, that of all of the vouchers that go out, the home districts that those would be associated with, 44% of the vouchers that went out, based on that state data, 44% of them are at districts that would not be considered to meet the state standards, where 56% of these that went out would be considered to meet the state standard.
I
And
think
so,
that's-
like
go
at
ahead.
Lakota, we met 4.5 last year. So we would be in that grouping of meet state standards.
And for me, this is a very telling slide as Adam and I were reviewing this, because the original, impetus or rationale for vouchers was underperforming schools or economically disadvantaged that needed a better education than what their local schools could provide. That is not what this graph is showing. This graph is showing that vouchers are actually taking away from high-performing schools, and Adam's going to even drill down to that so that you can see the 5 and the 4 and the 3, but this was not the original discussion about the purpose of vouchers. It was that your school was underperforming and you could have a different choice. And this slide tells a very different rationale for that.
So next slide, please. We drilled this down to show the actual breakdown of 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, and 1-star districts. And you can see that the biggest group, really 39.24% of the overall distribution, is of a 2-star district, with only 4.49% being a 1-star district. But then when you get to the 3, 4, and 5-star, you actually have 12.64% that's coming from 5-star districts, which,
Significantly exceeding expectations, not
Which-
just exceeding, but significantly exceeding.
yeah. So that's where the breakdown of that's coming through. Then if we go to the next slide, please. This is showing, let me zoom back a little bit so I can see my slide. This is showing the distribution by report card and the demographics. So what we did, this was a little bit trickier. We took, if a district was meeting the expectation, the 3 stars or higher, that would be in the yes column. And then if they did not meet the 3 stars, so the 2 stars or 1 stars would be in the no column, to then show 100% of that, how that's distributed based on demographics. And you can see that in the no column, the 20.83 is the white non-Hispanic, 13.4 is black non-Hispanic, then you have Hispanic, multiracial, Asian Pacific Islander, American Indian, or Alaskan Native. Then in the districts that do meet the state standards, you will see the same lineup of white non-Hispanic, 49.818%, and then the black non-Hispanic goes to 1.96%, Hispanic at 1.64%, multiracial at 2.14%, and I can't even on my screen see what the top 2 are, so they got to be very small. So this was the information that we were able to pull together pretty quickly this afternoon to kind of prepare and to just illustrate some of that. And then next slide will show the links. Again, this has been saved to PDF. It's been shared in board docs. Anybody can click out. The On the Money is a newsletter that went out by Dr. Howard Fleeter. And so that's not a link, but all the rest of them, you can select these links and everybody can pull the same data that we were able to pull on this.
Thank you.
Because sometimes what we found is once you get into the DEW website, it can be a little tricky to get back to the same spots where you were just at. So we tried to grab all of these.
I think another component that we talked about that's certainly captured here, but captured in that kind of the expenditures of the state versus a pupil model, is that when you look at the voucher, you think, okay, that is the money that is being reallocated to private schools or private entities. It's a little bit different than just that bottom line, right? There is the voucher component, but on top of that, the public school entity is still responsible for transportation to those private schools, and we are still responsible for special services related to those children that they might need. And so when you see the voucher amount, that's the absolute lowest it can be. There are additional costs on top of that that the local school district as a public entity feels that are still being flowed to those private school entities other than just the absolute voucher piece. The other piece of that as far as vouchers is the majority of students who are taking a voucher in Lakota local schools have never stepped foot in a Lakota local school, not any of our 23 buildings. And so to say that they aren't experiencing a quality education from us, you can't say that if you've never attended, right? I mean, yes, you might certainly have data that you can peruse or look at, but again, it's a very different experience when you've never experienced Lakota local schools as a public school and choosing somewhere else before you've ever experienced it. And so I think just with all of that said, when you look at, yes, we are a large school district, absolutely. But to be 4th in the state of Ohio for vouchers makes you pause. And then when you, again, contribute the flow of money besides just the vouchers, but those additional costs of transportation and services, that is an additional burden. And then also, again, really grappling with, me personally, I think, and I think that's part of our conversation as well, is the original kind of rationale or discussion around vouchers just continues to change, right? You had the expansion of vouchers. It was started again, one of the early premises was about for families of low income. That income now has adjusted to approximately $140,000. That is a very different amount than even what it qualifies for free and reduced lunch. And so to think that there's that drastic a difference in thresholds, basic necessity of food versus what is the cap for private education. It just seems that those are in a little bit of a conflict, and so I think that's one of the things that we want to discuss with our legislators is how they perceive that, how they view that, and then again, some questions perhaps around sustainability, rationale, and kind of the ever-evolving narrative around vouchers themselves.
Right. All right,
Another thing to remember, Representative Hall did say that he had a hard stop at 7 o'clock.
Absolutely.
So if,
Yeah, we want to respect all their time,
Yep.
so hopefully we could hear from them. Are they
here?
Senator Lang? Representative Hall? Representative Gross?
Yes, I am here.
Okay,
Yay.
okay. So you want to go ahead and...
If you could, just so we can hear a voice and a name together, I think that would be helpful. So if you could just introduce yourselves, so that, again, not only us, but the audience can hear your voice and make sure we know who we're speaking to. But then just give us kind of your current viewpoint or stance, even before kind of a question session, just about vouchers in general and your current belief about vouchers in public schools and in Ohio. Jennifer, do you want to go first, perhaps? Or Ms. Gross?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? This is State Representative Jennifer Gross, and I am the State Rep of Westchester. Sorry, there's a terrible echo. So my belief is that how and where we educate our children is vital to the success of our community and our state's success. My duty to the students and the parents is to hear them as they address the needs of their students. Meeting the expectations of our district means that there was a large cry for educational choice. It's not a negative view of Lakota per se. What it is it's parents choosing the best option for their child. So it's funding the child, not the system. And I don't have my latest data, but generally it's understood that whatever letter you have behind your name, whether it's a DNR or you are independent, our population is greater than 60% in favor of educational choice. Educational vouchers are part of that choice. So that is where I've chosen to land, and that is because the parents have asked for educational choice.
Thank you. Senator Lang, are you?
Thomas, you want to go next?
There he is.
I think, yeah.
Senator Lang, why don't you go ahead and go, and then we'll have Representative Hall.
Yep, I'll be happy to go. I apologize for the echo. I hope you all don't have it the way I have it.
We don't hear it at all, so we're okay. We apologize for the inconvenience on your end, but we don't hear it at all.
Good. So I'm a strong believer in vouchers. As a strong believer in the market, I believe in free markets. And what vouchers are doing, they are giving parents the choice. Those good public schools are going to compete, and they're going to keep those students, and they're going to pick up students from other school districts. And those schools that are struggling aren't going to compete. And I got to tell you, some of the, and I did not have the slides, so I don't have the benefits of looking at the slides. But some of the assertions that were made, I have to push back on. When you said that money has been reallocated to private schools, I'm sorry, that's not right. Everything that has gone to the voucher program is in addition. Lakota has only experienced significant increases in the last.
You just dropped Senator Lang.
Sorry,
You're back.
it muted me. Lakota has only continued to get a significant increase in funds from the state. In 2022, you have $47 million $451,653. In 2024, you have $49,513,291. An additional $2 million when you're telling me right now that you're losing population to the vouchers. And the other thing I'm going to push back on, you guys should be embarrassed that you're the fourth highest school district in the state in the voucher program. You're the seventh largest school district. Your fair share should be to be number 7. But the fact you're number 4 tells me parents are making choices that parents in other school districts aren't making. And I know for a long time you guys have been pushing a woke ideology. I have empirical data of it, and I think parents are saying, hey, that's enough. We want to go to a place where our schools focus on education, not on indoctrination. Thank you for giving me some time to share my thoughts.
Thank you. Representative Hall?
Representative Hall, he's got a really bad echo on his end, so we're going to try to do through speakerphone, and we'll see how this picks up. So go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I'm trying to adjust the mic. Go ahead and talk.
Okay, test.
Yep, seems to be coming through good.
Okay, number one, I apologize for not being there in person. Energy Committee started today, and we got a new sub-bill we're working on for that. And then the last 2 days, this meeting could not have been any worse of a time. With the last 2 days, we've heard over 10 hours of public testimony in regards to school funding and in regards to the state's operating budget as I sit on Finance Committee. So after I get off at 7, I will rest assured go back right into our conversations about this very topic and also the rest of the state's budget. Friday is a big deadline for us members in the House. That is the deadline for our first round of amendments. And one quick thing I want to say before I get into my stance on vouchers. House Bill 96 is our operating budget. That is wholeheartedly correct. But if you're upset with House Bill 96, you need to be upset with the governor because this is his budget that has been presented to the legislature. We just began testimony yesterday. And like I said, today, and we'll have testimony tomorrow. In the last 2 days, we've heard over 10 hours of public input on the budget. I also have set up a meeting with Adam and a number of other public schools in our district for Friday. And I look forward to having these conversations again as we bring down some policy people from our team to discuss school funding. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with Representative Gross and Senator Lang. And let's be very clear. Under this legislature, vouchers are here to stay. And we will continue to look at funding the voucher program. In 2023, I was not on Finance Committee. We did both. We funded public education and we funded vouchers. I wholeheartedly believe that the parent should be making the decision on what is best for their student.
Thank you.
You still there? I'm sorry, it cut out. Right? You still there?
Yep. You did a pause, and we didn't know if you were finished or not. You still have the floor.
Okay. Well, that is my stance on vouchers. I obviously am here. I apologize again for not being in person, but I've listened to our district, and I represent a district just like you guys represent a school. And our district has overwhelmingly said that vouchers are a good thing for education. So appreciate everybody's time tonight. Be happy to follow up with anybody separately. If I don't get around to any of the questions that they have, please follow up with our office. But be happy to take other questions at this time.
Thank you.
I'll just leave you on speakerphone, and whenever you want to talk, I'll bring you back up to the mic.
I think we got clarity on everybody's stance on vouchers just with those brief introductions. So I think that will lead us into perhaps some of our individual questions around vouchers. And so I don't know if somebody wants to lead, or I can take the lead on that.
Do you want to start, Isaac, and we can go around the table?
Okay, I will start.
And if you want to direct your question, or if you want all three to answer it, I would also kind of pinpoint that in the questioning.
I want to thank you all for taking out time to join us as we deliberate through this. This has been my dream since I came on the board, to be able to have a say in education of our kids. And I'm so glad that I'm getting the opportunity tonight to do that, because there has been a lot of government overreach, a lot of legislations in the past that hindered the school district to really do what they're supposed to do because of legislation. And I'm glad you guys did this, and I don't have any question besides thanking you for taking out the time to come and educate us. From what I'm hearing today, is this the voice and the choice of the parents. And we have 60% of parents that said said they want to be involved and be responsible for the education of their kids, which is over. That's the percentage we need to do what we need to do. And you guys did this, and we have this voucher bill that has passed. So thank you all for stepping out tonight. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Doug, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, so I have a few questions. So first, I want to thank all three of you. I know how difficult it is to schedule time with us, much less do it and try to experience that on a phone call, Zoom call, whatever we're doing this through. So definitely appreciate your patience, and I will try to reduce the echo as much as possible on your end. Senator Lang, you mentioned that Lakota is receiving more dollars, and despite an exodus of students to vouchers. I'm curious, what makes you say that? When I'm looking at the data, I see that between 2022 and 2024, Lakota actually has 361 more students enrolled during that time frame, which accounts for the majority of that difference of $2 million based on the spending that we get from the state. So I'm interested to hear where you're thinking we're getting this mass exodus from.
Yeah, so my point was this: there was a statement made that said money being allocated to the voucher program is being taken away from public schools. And that's not true. That's not true. We have only increased the amount of money going to public schools, and I'll be happy to send you the data that we have from the state. I'll be happy to forward that to Adam tomorrow, and he can distribute it to the entire board. Literally, the numbers: $47,451,653 in 2022, $49,513,291, an additional $2 million. Now, I think some of the criticism of the program that you have to pay for transportation, there is some fair criticism. Parts of the program I don't like, and I'm all for competition. And I'm sorry, guys, I think Lakota can compete. Not only do I think you can compete, I think if you figure it out, you can dominate. What I don't like, to a degree, we are asking you to compete with handcuffs on, because you have to take all students. The people in the private schools, they don't have to. They can turn away that student with English as a second language. So if you want to start talking about how to try to come up with a more fair system, I'm all in. But if you're going to sit here and attack the voucher program as being anti-public schools, the data we have at the state doesn't support that. It is pro-parent.
Like, I appreciate that. I've never attacked vouchers or said that it's anti-public schools.
Sorry,
so I do have some questions that I want to make sure that we get to.
Doug?
So I understand that, but I'm not attacking vouchers and saying it's against public schools. What I'm trying to understand is your question. So I appreciate the fact that you brought up handcuffs on public education. So and I will appreciate all the state data. I think we've reviewed it, but please send that along. But for when we look at Lakota, when we look at the dollars that we get from the state per pupil, we're averaging $2,839 per student. But when I look at this school, the payments that were made to the providers through the Ed Choice expansion for average across all the Butler County providers is $4,186. When I look at CCS alone, they're averaging $5,337. So my question is, I welcome the competition, and actually I want a child to get a great education wherever they're at. What I want to know is, why is the state sending, 50% more dollars to students who are choosing these educations versus the 90% of Lakota students that are choosing to stay in public education?
Yeah, so I can't answer that directly because I don't have the data you're having. I'll share my data with you. You share yours with me, and I will be happy to go back and forth. But I can tell you one of the reasons why parents are moving. I talked earlier about the woke ideology, and when my dear friend Linda O'Connor was on the board, I told Linda,
I appreciate that. You've brought up woke twice, and we've not asked.
Wait, you asked me a question. You want me to answer it or not?
And I have other questions for Representative.
Okay, great. You can ask those questions when I
want to respect Mr. Hall's time.
You can ask those questions when I finish my statement. If you want me to hang up and not participate, I'm happy to. Your call. What do you want?
We need you to continue, sir.
Okay, then I'm going to continue. Thank you. So when Linda was on the board, I literally told her, you have under Lodi on your website a statement that says, we hire our teachers based on the diversity of our students, including religious, including race, including transgender, including sexual orientation. And let me be very clear. If you're teaching my kid, I really don't care your race. I don't care your sexual identity. I don't care if you are transgender. I don't care what religion you follow. I care you're the best. And not once did that statement say we seek to hire the best, most qualified students. About 2 weeks after I brought that to Linda's attention, it was taken off of the website. I would encourage you guys to focus rather on joining a lawsuit, spending the taxpayers' money, improving your product. Thank you very much. Thomas?
Thank you, Senator Lang. So my question is for either Representative Gross or Representative Hall. Both of you mentioned that you're looking for the outcome of this to be school parent choice, which I completely respect. My question for you is, what outcomes are you looking at for this program as it's executed? Is it solely that parents get to choose wherever? I mean, when I turn left at a stoplight and I want to turn right, that's a choice. But what are you actually looking to achieve with these dollars that you're investing in vouchers?
Thomas, I can put you up to the mic.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Who was the one that asked the question? I'll make sure I direct my questions.
This is Douglas Horton.
Can
Who
you,
was it? I can't hear it.
Mr. Horton, can you hear okay on our end or not so good?
It's not so good, but that's okay. Mr. Warden, I appreciate your questions. I actually, I gotta say, Representative Gross has some data that I'm sure she'll share with you, and I'd be happy to share with you as well. And you talked about the pure pupil cost of a student, and I believe you mentioned around $20-something hundred in your statement. Some of the estimates that I'm looking at, according to our policy numbers, that again, Representative Gross has reached out to our policy team on, it shows that actually Lakota looks like that the state funding is only a portion of the revenue that they actually receive to their students. Looking at fiscal year 24, the latest school year for which final information is available, of course, Lakota Local received $13,538 per pupil in total revenue, state, local, and federal sources. Again, not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I just would like to, find out some more information on where you get that number of 2,000 from. Is that just a state share? Because later on it says actual state average revenue per pupil last year was about $7,400. So If you'd be happy to share that information with me, Mr. Warden, I'd be happy to share our information that we have on our end as well. Getting back to your question, about vouchers. Again, our caucus is literally debating this topic as we speak. And as we look at what the operating budget is going to look like going into this next biennium. As we go into the next biennium, I'm going to tell you that there are three big topics of conversation that are being had. And number one is obviously school funding and the future of school funding. Number two is property tax, which is something I've worked for, since 2023. And then the last thing is energy, which is why I have to get off the call at 7 o'clock to go over our sub bill that we introduced today, and we're hoping to vote out next week. I think that, I could speak for 3 hours about property tax and what I'm trying to do for property tax and why it does matter or doesn't matter to public education. But with Ed Choice, I mentioned my statement in the beginning, and I want to be very clear. Our caucus is very pro Ed Choice, very, very pro voucher. Where we are, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but where we are a little bit not on the same page is some of the things that Senator Lang talked about with regards to how private schools operate versus how public schools operate, and kind of the handcuffs analogy that he had used in his response. So we're continuing to look at that. Again, if anybody has told you that Lakota Schools is getting this money or they're not getting this money, they are lying to you. All the estimates that are out right now is from the governor's as introduced budget. We have not had the chance to introduce our budget in the House. And for those of you that are following bills at home, so we'll introduce our bill. The goal is to vote that out by April 9th, which is in just a few weeks away, which is why we have such a speedy timetable here. And then the Senate will get their bite at the apple with the budget. Hope to have the budget signed by the end of June, as always, and hopefully leave more time at the end for us to negotiate on things such as this and what the future of Ed Choice means for the state of Ohio. Again, I represent a district that is very pro school choice, very pro voucher district. And you might ask Mr. Horton, well, how do you know that? Well, I campaign and I love to campaign, and I love getting out and talking to people. And this continuously is an issue because I believe as a fundamental right, parents should be able to decide what's best for their kids, and they should decide where they should want to send their kids. So I look forward to, again, having the meeting on Friday with Adam, who is, he's been a great, contact throughout this whole process of figuring out, what we can do in the budget. Because again, it's very early in the process. We have not decided on anything. If anybody has told you otherwise, they are lying to your face, because we've yet to really have a caucus on it. The only part that we've ever really discussed school funding at a more enhanced level was our retreat that happened in January, where we mentioned a lot of different things, had a lot of discussions, and I look forward to having those discussions with our colleagues, and then obviously reporting that back to you. And that's obviously the most important step is being able to show and tell you why we're doing things and what we're doing. That's kind of one of the hardest things I've found with this job is being able to explain everything. Because the last 2 days, from 7 a.m. till 11 o'clock last night and 7 a.m. till, 10 o'clock tonight, we'll be in meetings and discussions. So I hope I answered your question. If I didn't answer your question, please, let me know. I'll happily, answer your question directly.
Thank you,
So,
Representative.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
this is Representative Gross. I think you had asked about, could you repeat your question? Would you like me to answer?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to. So understand that you articulated that you were looking for this expansion of Ed Choice to increase parental choice. I was curious if you had any other goals or outcomes that you were hoping to see as coming out of the investment of these dollars.
I guess what I really want to see is a children's love for learning. And I believe that Lakota can offer that, but I also still, again, like I said before, not to repeat it again, but to repeat it again, the parents know best where their children will learn best. And, whether you're in a public or you're in a charter non-public, or they all, believe it or not, they all have to follow a number of state laws, including ones related to testing. Teacher qualifications. Teachers are still required to be qualified in these schools. High school graduation and units of instruction, diploma requirements, and we have a longer list. We have the lsc.ohio.gov, and we do have the Legislative Service Commission that will talk about all those requirements. But sometimes people will say, well, they aren't required to live by the same requirements, but actually they do. And so the last thing that I would say to you that determines success for the students is whether the parents keep returning to those schools. Whether they chose Lakota first or they chose whatever school, school ABC, you had mentioned CCS. Again, that was the parents' choice. And so the parents felt that that was the best environment. Now, I know of a parent, very dear friend of mine, their children were in a private school and have returned to Lakota. And they had that choice. And the beautiful thing about whether it's homeschooling or even we have a lovely Montessori school in our district, whatever the parents choose, the parents love their children more than anyone. And so when they determine success, some children, as you guys know better as educators and as school board members probably than others, is that not every person's determination of success is not always the same. Certainly we have to fulfill those the requirements that the state sets, but success to a parent of a child who has certain gifts and skills in one area may be different. And so it all comes down to choice, and it all comes down to what is best for that student. And as hard as it is, it's actually beautiful to watch a child have that love for learning no matter what environment they're in. So I hope that has answered your question about, metrics and things that we're looking for to determine success. But I think that's what it comes down to, is that parents love their children best as much as you guys love them and as much as we love them as well. That those children will succeed best when they're placed in an environment where they will be planted and they will thrive to the best of their ability.
Thank you so much.
Mrs. Frick?
You're welcome.
All right, we're moving on to the next board member to ask questions.
I want to start off by saying thank you so much for joining us tonight. Having the opportunity to hear your viewpoints is very helpful for us to understand a little bit of the history of where this decision came from and how things began. So thank you so much for taking your time tonight to be here with us. I'm actually going to start off with Mr. Hall, because I know you have to go fairly soon and we're cutting it close to the 7 p.m. time. So based on the graphs that we were shown tonight, the majority of students that are taking advantage of the voucher program are white middle-class students. And so my question is, how will you ensure that the voucher program doesn't create deeper segregation in our public schools?
I think the question was, how do we ensure that we don't create further segregation in our public schools? Was that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think, again, going back to the premise that we've said 100 times, that parents get to make the best decision for what their kids thrive in, what their kids, work well in. I think, I would have to see the graph. I'm speculating based on what you had said. I haven't seen the graphs yet. Adam did send these over, so I'll be happy to look at those in preparation for our meeting for Friday. But I think, these conversations, whether it's, talking about a kid's race or talking about a kid's learning ability, these all are a part of our discussions that we're having right now. And I would kind of, push back a little bit and challenge many of you in the room who are listening or who are a part of the board. We want you to be a part of the legislative process. We want you to be able to testify I'd love to have you, I can even help you guys be able to testify in front of Finance Committee on this and what you believe. So, I know I have to hop off in a few minutes, but I want you guys to know this conversation doesn't end when I get off the phone at 7 o'clock. I hope that this is just the genesis of this conversation. It's important to know where we all stand on issues. That's absolutely true, but there's a multitude of other issues that I'm working on that deal with property tax, that deal with school safety, that I also want to have this conversation with the school board on. I think, again, when it comes to, I went to public school. I think that I didn't make that point known in my opening remarks, but I went to public school. I went to Madison. Our district has great public schools, and make no mistake about that. I want to make sure that point's known. I have great relationships with our public schools in our district, and that's through constant communication, and that's through talking with them and learning from them. I don't know what I don't know, so I need to constantly be hearing and reaching, and I need to do a better job in some regard of maybe reaching out more to the Lakota School District, like I've done for other schools. So apologize. I'll take the blame for that. I appreciate, again, the opportunity to come tonight. And I think as we go through this process, we're going to weigh all the factors. We're not just going to weigh one or two factors, but everything is on the table. And that's a part of the legislative process.
Thank you.
Is this Mrs. Schaefer? Is that Mrs. Schaefer or Miss Casper?
It's Mrs. French.
Hi, Mrs. French. I apologize. May I answer that a little bit?
Sure.
This is Representative Gross. Though private schools can discriminate, like private religious schools they have the ability to consider religion in admission decisions, right? So they do have the right if they're religious schools. Private schools cannot discriminate based on race, color, or national origin. The state law prohibits the schools from requiring families to disclose if they are low income as part of their admissions procedure. But we do have a state standard on racial non-discriminatory policy for private schools on our education.ohio.gov website. So, and I do believe, I don't have the statistics specifically because I do have CCS in my district. I do believe that CCS is largely more diverse than Lakota. I don't know that to be, I've just been told that they have a very high diverse population. So again, I would say that we are not permitted to discriminate based on race, color, national origin. But private religious schools do have the ability to consider religion in their admission decisions. So if that answers your question, and there's more information to be found at education.ohio.gov.
Thank you. And while I have you on the line, I actually have a question for you as well that's just kind of a logistical question.
Okay.
So you stated that based on conversations you had on the campaign trail, that parents were in favor of the voucher program and having the opportunity to choose. In the beginning, you said that 60% are in favor of ed choice. Can you help me understand where that 60% came from?
It's been a while. I can get you the information, but actually it was like 80% Republicans and 60, maybe not quite, maybe it was like 73% Republicans and 62% Democrats, and then the average was 68%. I under quoted you, but it's actually higher than 60% when we look at all groups of people that want educational choice. I'd be happy to get you some of that information. It's been out there for several years, like at least the last 4 years. So I'm sure we can get that information. I'd be happy to get that for you.
Okay, thank you. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then Christina, if I could, because Thomas is going to be getting off, I want to respect all the representative and senators' time. If there's any other pressing questions that we want to make sure that we have for Mr. Hall, or Representative Hall, if we could do that, please, before we move on, since we probably only have time for one more question for him.
I was going to say the numbers that Representative Hall said about overall, when you include the federal, the state, and the local, those seem to be a fair representation. The funding that we have on the $2,800 is coming from our base funding.
Right.
That's the base, not all of the entire components. It's just that base number. So it always makes me happy from the accounting side to seem like that we're looking from a same data point, because that definitely has been tricky in this process.
All right. Is there anyone else who has a pressing question for Representative Hall?
Mine are just generic. so
Yeah, not
it's fine.
specifically. Okay, then go ahead, Christine.
Okay. Senator Lang, I do have a question for you as well. So a lot of the data that we have looked at today, and I know you're well aware, we are very closely tied to our state report card and the results that our students portray through our state testing, and a lot of our academic dollars are tied to that success. So my question is, how will the state ensure that private schools are held to the same academic standards as public schools are?
That is a fair question, and I would be happy to work with the board on figuring out what is the best way to do that. We've grappled with that within our caucus. We want the parents to be in charge of the educational dollars. You know, as I said before, and I love Thomas Hall, I know he pushed back a little, but I do think we are asking public schools to compete on an unfair playing field, because that private school, you know, my concern when we first came out with the voucher program was the only people that are going to be able to get vouchers are that are going to be able to go to private schools are the gifted and the wealthy. The private school, they don't have to take that kid that doesn't speak English, as I spoke before. They don't have to take a kid with a severe disability, but they can take the best athletes and the best scholars. And the wealthy, you know, they really don't need help. They can send their kids wherever they want without any help anyway. So, you know, I've always had some concerns about the voucher program, although I fully support parental choice. I think eventually the market will make up for those deficiencies right now. If the public schools don't, we will see a private school coming along that specializes only in students that speak English as a second language. I believe long-term the market can fix or fill every single need we have there. So I can't give you a direct answer, but I can tell you I'd be happy to meet with you guys privately. And if you want to share some thoughts or ideas how to do that, happy to entertain that.
Can I ask just a quick question for my own knowledge? And this is for any of our representatives or anyone on the board. Is there a cap on the family income for people who can apply for the vouchers? So you said that the wealthy don't need help.
Yes.
Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
The answer. Yeah, go
ahead.
ahead, Senator.
Jennifer, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. Thank you. When we are up to 450% the poverty level. So it's graduated. So once you hit that, it reduces. So if parents, for instance, the average home price in Lakota or in Liberty is $500,000, Westchester is $440,000, roughly. And so we have high income. So a lot of the students that do get the Ed Choice scholarships are not getting the full scholarship. The maximum per student is for high school is $8,407, and for the child K-8 is $6,166, but that is up to those amounts. So once you hit the 450% of the poverty level, you start reducing what the state pays. So, you know, maximum would be you multiply those numbers times all the students in the particular age group. But remembering that, like what Representative Hall said, for state, local, and federal, the total amount per student in Lakota right now being spent and given is $13,538. So even at the max, Lakota still keeps that private and state funding, the private property tax and federal funding still goes to Lakota, even if the student goes to a private school. So Lakota still keeps that local amount. Only the state funding follows the child. Some people used to call it a backpack. So we say that the backpack price goes with the child. So it's only the state funding that goes with that child.
And if I can add just one more thing to that, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you,
For people at the very highest level, they only qualify for 10% of the total voucher that's available. So the voucher is available to anyone regardless of income, but the wealthy take a much lower piece of the voucher. And as Jennifer pointed out, this is a very important fact. Every parent that takes advantage of the voucher, Lakota still gets their base from the state for that student.
We don't.
No, we don't.
Okay, I know
Thomas,
Representative,
Representative Hall had something he wants to say. I've got you up to the mic if you want to do that before you drop off. I know we just hit 7.
I would be completely remiss, and I would, Adam would kill me if I didn't mention, the elephant in the room when it does come to school funding, something that nobody's brought up, is the 20 mil floor. And that's something that I will let Adam explain to you guys a lot more in depth, but Lakota is actually not at the 20 mil floor, which means that they will, it's much different than, Madison and Monroe and some of these valuation increases and the amount of monies that schools would get based on property tax, because 66% of our property tax bills go towards public education. So that's also the other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is we're beginning to debate that. We also, again, have House Bill 15, our energy bill. Energy is one of the most important topics we're discussing right now. I encourage all of you to go and look at our sub bill. I want to leave you with my email. My personal state email is very easy, thomas.hall, Hall, at ohiohouse.gov. Whether it's school funding, whether it's energy policy, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to set up a meeting or be happy to have you in Columbus if you're more willing to come testify on a subject in Columbus. But apologize that I do have to hop off. I appreciate the opportunity as always to come before you on short notice in this budget week. But please don't hesitate to reach out. Adam, Mrs. Schaefer, I'll see you guys on Friday. So thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for participating.
All right, so Mr. Lang, are you done? Adam, do you want to address the piece of how the funding works if a student, or do you want to speak to that at all?
I was typing an email to the people on here to let them know, and I'll share this with the audience for the representative, Jennifer Gross, who's still on, and Senator Lang. We have probably about 50 people in the audience. It's nice to see a nice crowd. It's been a while since we've seen a nice crowd. Yeah. I'll add the email addresses into the minutes, and I was just typing any of these items that they would like to share. We'll add those into the minutes as well. We'll have those attachments on, so if anybody would like to see that, they'll be able to see it. Unless they didn't want that to be shared like that, then it would be available via public record request. Obviously, public record with us. So,
Do you want to address the comment about when a child leaves and the dollars stay here?
restate the statement to me so that I can get back. Sorry about that. So I can get my brain back on that.
George had mentioned that I'm sorry, Senator Lang, I apologize.
That's okay. It's all right. And I was just repeating what Rep. Gross said.
Okay.
Yeah, Representative Gross, if you're still on the line, could you go back there? I apologize. Could you go back to that? I was working on the email to you guys.
Yes. What do you need me to repeat?
That if a student is going to a private school, that we are retaining those state dollars.
Mm-hmm. No, I did not say that. You're retaining local and federal dollars.
Yes.
So
okay.
the state dollars follow the child in the backpack.
Yes.
Okay.
And the local property tax and the federal dollars stay with Lakota. So essentially, you had 25 students, 5 take the voucher. Only the state money goes with the child, but the local property tax and the federal money still goes to Lakota, not the school that the child goes to. So Lakota then maintains for 5 students that they aren't educating, they get all the local property tax dollars as well as the federal money for students they aren't educating.
Yes, we do get the property tax dollars. They do stay with us, and that does not
And
get
the federal.
redistributed over. The federal on certain things like Idea B, we do have to service those children if they are attending other schools. So even though we do receive that, then we still have to go out and service with our staff, which is kind of an efficient model. You know, that way those other entities wouldn't necessarily have to utilize an ESC or something like that because they wouldn't necessarily need a full FT, but we do still service those children
And
Yes.
possibly transport them.
and that as well. Yeah.
But I mean, if they're high school, we only have freshmen. So for sophomore, juniors, and seniors, we have no transportation.
Correct.
Correct.
All right. Christina, did you have any more questions for anyone?
I do not. Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for repeating the question. Sorry, I was in the midst of typing this email to you guys. So now that you guys know, just let me know if you didn't want that added to the minutes and I won't add it and then we would just have it available. If somebody did do a request for that. Also, I'll add all of your email addresses. Since Representative Hall mentioned his email address, I'll add that in to board docs in this section so that anybody in attendance would like to email you guys, they'll have direct access to that as well.
All right.
If
And
you
how,
guys don't mind, I would like to mention that according to our policy staff at the House, Lakota's total revenue for this year, FY25, will be $217 million, up from $192.7 million in fiscal year 2022. So I just wanted to be really clear on the amount of money of your total revenues for Lakota. I just thought that was important for the community to know what numbers we're actually talking about.
Are you referencing overall funds or are you just referencing the general fund? Because if you're just
Total revenue, according to the House, is $217 million in fiscal year 25, up from $192.7 million fiscal year 2022, due to an increase in both local tax resources and a moderate increase in state funding. And then the other thing, I think it's important to remember that because they consider under the Fair School Funding Plan, and I know that's kind of maybe sometimes a misnomer to us because we're the suburbs, Lakota's state share percentage for that is 19.1% this year. So we receive less from the state than other districts because we are considered, it's the way the formula operates. We are identified as a district that has the ability to raise wealth locally. And so a less affluent, say, Eastern Cleveland, their house values are lower, so they collect lower property tax. And so I'm not saying it's fair. I don't like it called the Fair School Funding, but I just think it's important to be sure that as we're talking about budgets and things, that we understand that all is not equal when it comes to the state and the way we do funding for schools. And it gets, as you well know, very complicated.
That's and that is accurate. We are currently in fiscal year 25, 19.1%. The House Bill 96 that did, based on the simulation that they had provided with us, that's dropping us due to another year of, they take a 3-year property tax average in because of another year of our lower values going off. That's dropping us next year down to 11%. And then when the third year comes on in the end of the the upcoming biennium rather, that would drop us down to 10%. So 10%, the reason for the not larger drop again is because with that Fair School Funding Plan, they had increased the state minimum share from 5% to 10%. So kind of like Representative Hall mentioned, on the tax side, you have a 20 mil floor that just says you can't go below that. So we're not to that minimum state allowable yet. But on the, if House Bill, if the funding components don't get adjusted, we could potentially hit that minimum floor on the state funding side of 10%, which then, as Representative Gross mentioned, I mean, that is something. It says that we have the ability to raise local dollars more than other districts would, and that would potentially result in us, going to an ask to the community to fund that. So So yeah, those were all very fair statements by Representative Gross. Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, in respecting your time, do we have a couple questions?
I'd like to ask a couple questions if it's
All right,
possible.
Mrs. Casper will be asking now.
First of all, again, thank you for joining us. We realize it was short notice, so we really appreciate you being here. And on another note, I would love to invite all of you to come into our buildings. Mrs. Gross mentioned that some of the reasons that parents choose to go to a private school is to show the love of learning. And I think you will see in our buildings that we have students who love learning and are thriving. So we really do love it when our legislators come into our building, and we know you're busy. So anytime, just call us up and we will take you around. That's just my little
Thank you.
invitation.
I go
invitation.
to West ball games and the Veterans
you
Day at
go.
East with Sally Barker and
Oh, yeah.
naturalization ceremonies.
We love when
And I love it.
come.
I love it.
We love when you come. I'm going to piggyback because I also had the same question that Mrs. French had about becoming, for lack of a better word, the haves and the have-nots when you have a voucher. I don't think anybody on this panel is against school choice. We are not against school choice. We just want to make sure that it's done equally. And for instance, the reason that it could become a have and have not situation is that, for instance, someone mentioned we have a community Montessori school. Well, it's between $10,000 and $11,000 to go to that school, K-8, and the voucher only covers $61.66. So the parents that can afford to send them there, I think, have a leg up, which is why we're trying to ask if there's any kind of anything you're looking at that would help families that can't afford that level if they choose that. Mueller and X are $17,000. The voucher is $8,407. So only the wealthy can afford to send their children if they choose that school. So I guess my question would be, is there anything that we can look at or that we can brainstorm that would make it more fair for those if there are low-income families that want that option? What can we do for
That is
them?
a great question. That's a great question. Thank you, Ms. Casper. So we do have another state scholarship fund that allows each family in Ohio, a couple or an individual. So it'd be $750 per person or a couple of $1,500. And we are able to donate that money to one of the schools. We do have a list on the website for the state, and I'm sorry, I do not have that readily available right now, but it is a dollar for dollar credit. So for instance, if you decide that you want to donate to a particular school, you give $1,500 out of your pocketbook, and then when you file your taxes, you get a dollar for dollar return for that donation to a school. What that does is that allows a school like Community Montessori to give scholarships to children and really raise them up if they need it. Most, as we talked about earlier, with our average home prices in Liberty being around $500,000 and Westchester $440,000, we do have children like that in our school district, and we do have people that need assistance. But the hope is that we can also fill in with other people that, out of the kindness of their heart, are able to give to some of those children. The schools also will allow those students at the price of the voucher to attend the school.
Thank you. Senator Lang, I would love to pick your brain on how we can make private schools have some sort of accountability like the public schools as far as state testing. I don't believe that the only way to find out if a state or a private school is doing well is if the students stay there. I think the same could be said about public schools, but we don't have that luxury. We have to answer to state testing and all of the other report card components. So I would welcome a conversation with you at some point on how we can work together to make sure that they basically have to answer to the state the way the public schools have to answer to the state. So
Senator Lang and
so-
Ms. Casper,
Yeah.
if you would allow me, we do have certain rules like teacher qualifications, and we do have state laws including ones related to testing, high school graduation, units of instruction, and diploma requirements. So we do have some of those requirements in with the private schools already, and that is located at www.lsc.ohio.gov/assets/organizations/legislative-service-commission. And it talks about chartered non-public schools.
You're going to have to
Rep-
email
yeah,
that to me.
If you will
Okay.
email that back to me, I will attach that in the minutes as well for all to see.
I started writing that.
Absolutely,
I started writing.
absolutely.
And just,
And Julie, I would be happy to
This
sit
is
down
Ke-
with
it's
you and
Kelly
talk
you're
about
answering.
some of my, oh, Kelly, I am so sorry.
that's
I would
okay.
be happy to sit down with you and Julie and share some thoughts I have and listen to some thoughts you have to see if there is a better way forward. Happy to do that. I'd love to tie it in with a tour of the facilities you mentioned earlier.
Great. And then one final question, how Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution says, the General Assembly shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as with the income arising from the school trust fund will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. But no religious or other sect or sect shall ever have any exclusive right to or control of any part of those school funds of this state. How does the voucher not, how is that addressed? Because while I'm reading that is the vouchers are in.
Would you like me to answer that,
Sure, either one of you is
Senator
fine.
Lang?
Yeah, either one.
Yeah,
So,
I would just say
um,
I'm not familiar with that clause. I'd be happy to look into it and get back
So-
to you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So
I
thank
can
you,
send it to
sir.
you, Senator.
What Section 6, Article 2 of the Ohio Constitution actually says is the General Assembly shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as with income arising from the school trust fund will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. But no religious or other sect or sects shall ever have any exclusive right to or control of any part of the school funds of this state. The state scholarship programs were determined to be constitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in the 2002 Zellman versus Simmons-Harris case when the constitutionality of the Cleveland Scholarship, Ohio's original state scholarship program, which was established in 1997, was challenged. So that is actually, so yes, you can't favor one over the other, but you also cannot exclude one, not the others.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Julie Schaefer now. I had a question on the funding right now. It's my understanding the vouchers in totality, not just the Ed Choice expansion, are totaling nearly $1 billion of the state budget. And there is no requirement to report back of how those funds are used. And I know we certainly have extensive requirements of reporting our financial resources. Are there any intentions to change that? And if so, how? And or are there any other parts of the budget where nearly $1 billion is being spent of taxpayer money where there isn't any transparency or accountability?
Senator, would you like to answer that? I do have an answer, but I don't want to.
Jennifer, I'll let you take the lead. You did great on the last one.
So this is why, Ms. Schaefer, why I voted yes on the original school funding bill 4 years ago. We raised the school funding by $2 billion, and I do believe in the last budget we raised it by $1.8 billion. Unfortunately, my mother was in the ICU, and so I was not present for that vote, and she did pass away. But I do believe that we have raised total, and I don't, my numbers aren't exact, so no one needs to write me and say you were off, but approximately $3.8 billion has been increased in the last 4 years because that was part of the agreement with the Cupp-Patterson bill. And so we have increased funding that way. So yes, there has been a large amount of money to go to school, the voucher program, but that was an intention, and the increase in school funding accounted for the fact that we knew that Ed Choice was coming.
But there's still no transparency or reporting requirements for that money. So again, is there any other part of the state budget that has nearly $1 billion without reporting requirements? And
Well, I guess I would say that is tuition, that's tuition bills. So when we are funding the school portion, the state portion of the student, the money following the child, that is largely the tuition fees that go with the student for those schools. So the schools publish their tuition fees, and and again, we go back to the same accountability as far as, I mean, I don't know if you're referring to curriculum and things like that, but to receive the scholarship funds, the private schools have to be chartered by the state. That means, that the schools need to follow state standards and take either state assessments or state-approved alternative assessments. So those proficiency results are posted online. So this year, the state is also going to release growth. We are going to be releasing growth scores for those students based on their performance over time on those tests. So I'm not sure what more, but again, I'm willing to discuss that with you as well as I'm sure Senator Lang is as well.
that would be appreciated. I'm sure Adam would like to just be able to say, this is how much we spend and not have to do any additional reporting to the state. It would save a little time in his department.
We would be able to reduce staffing.
Yeah.
Well,
On those,
I mean,
you mentioned
the proficiency results are posted online and
Yeah,
all that, a lot
I was
of
just
that.
going to ask more about those proficiency results because you mentioned that, and I was trying to find proficiency results, and the last results I found that I was able to access were 2019. So I would love if you had more recent proficiency results, because based on those 2019 results, there was a in-depth article that was done by the Enquirer that it's reported in that Enquirer article that they had looked at 2.5 million test results in 150 cities and compared the public school results to their private school counterparts. And in that article, they reported that 134 of the 150 public schools outperformed the private schools in their same exact city. So again, I guess that causes me to pause and question, are we really getting the bang for our buck with that investment if they're switching to a different school that then could perhaps, if we're using testing results as our accountability measure, is causing them to perform worse instead of better? For example, a place in Pepper Pike where I went to high school in that area, the public school had a 67% higher performance rate than their counterpart in the private school in that same area. Mason had 10% higher, again, according to this article. So if we are showing those proficiency reports, I would love to see how we compare within our demographic to those other schools to test that article from 2021, I believe, based on 2019 data. So can you share with us where we can find those proficiency results?
All I can tell
I don't
you
know.
is that,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Jen.
go ahead. We are going to
I
be
was going to say-
releasing growth scores for the students based on performance, and they should be coming out. I don't know exactly when those will come out, but again, I have to push back a little bit and say, again, the parents know best. And these children, if they're not being educated, the parents will move them to a school where they feel they're being successfully taught. But the other thing is too, that I don't know where we are now with state testing, but there are a lot of teachers and schools that do not like teaching to a test, and they don't like the testing. So I'm not sure that's where we're going to, always remain. But I still believe in the market will, like Senator Lang had mentioned earlier, it will even out, and those schools that are performing well will maintain their students, and those that are not will not maintain their school, period.
Senator Lang, did you have something you'd like to add?
No, I was going to say basically the same thing.
Okay.
As soon as that data is available, I'll be happy to forward it to you.
Perfect. So I just lost my train of thought, what I was going to ask. With public schools, it seems that there is this intention to continue to expand vouchers for the parental choice. Are there other areas of the state budget that there is the intent to do the same thing? For example, I don't take private transportation, or I don't do public transportation. I use private transportation. Will there be vouchers for school, for my own car? You know, I don't use the prison system, or I hope not to. So will there be will there be opportunities for me to pay for my own private security? It just seems interesting to me that this is the model that we're using in education, but we don't seem to be using that same model in other areas of public services.
I think the simple answer is, as someone stated earlier, it's built into our Constitution that we have a responsibility to educate the kids. And as Jennifer pointed out, it does not exclude private schools. It just can't be used exclusively for religious-based schools. Whereas transportation is not in our Constitution, and I'm pretty sure the right to go to jail isn't in our Constitution, but you certainly have opportunities to do that. And I hope you never make it there as well.
Good. Would it surprise you to learn that of those who are getting vouchers in the Ed Choice expansion within Lakota, that 94.8% of those vouchers are by families over 450% of the poverty level, or earning over 140,000 for a family of four? So only 5% of our families are earning under, a family of four are earning 140,000 who are getting vouchers. Is that a surprising statistic, or is that what you would have anticipated?
I guess it's not surprising. It has to do also, though, with the affluence of a large portion of our district. We are considered, I'm very middle class, but we are considered a very wealthy district. So when we look at percentages at 140,000 for, say a family of four, no, it really doesn't surprise me. Again, it just has to do with the parents' choice, wherever the parents choose to send their child.
And I would think that that would be good news for Lakota, because if that number was just the opposite, there'd be a lot more money going into the voucher program from Lakota. You know, it's interesting you shared this statistic that you're the number 4 school district in the state for participation in the voucher program, which I still stand by my assertion. You guys should be embarrassed by that. But I would be curious to see where you are on the statewide in terms of dollars in the voucher program. Adam, if you don't have that, I'm sure I can get it for you.
Yeah, any data would be very helpful. Thanks, Senator Lang.
Yep. I'll see. I'll reach out to our research team tomorrow.
Hey guys, I stand a little corrected. We don't have all schools. All schools are not able to receive Ed Choice scholarships. Our non-public, non-charter, which Community Montessori is part of, is not qualified to receive Ed Choice scholarships at the current time. We have a group of schools that is not currently in the Ed Choice scholarship. I don't know, I can't explain why, except to say I think it was an oversight.
Yeah, I'll just want to add one point, and then I will move over. I know others of my board members now would like to ask additional questions. Ohio's median, or Lakota's median income, according to the district profile report, is 59,000. So then if you do an average instead of the median, it's 116. So both of those for our district are well under that 100 or 450% of the poverty level. But Isaac had another question, I believe.
Yes, I did a lot of research. That was why at the beginning, I wanted to give my fellow board members to ask their questions, which I know has helped us tonight. But there's one thing I think has not been addressed. I want to know if in in your consideration for this bill, did you consider how the voucher programs address needs of students with disability? And will private schools be required to offer the same level of services and access as public schools? Because we don't have a choice. Everybody that comes to a door, we have to take them in. But is that same with the private schools?
Do you want to answer that, Senator Lang?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, in our caucus, I don't know about Jennifer's caucus, but in my caucus, those conversations never came up.
So it's my understanding, Mr. Adi, that a parent would take a child to a school where they can provide the services that that child needs. So for instance, we have autism scholarships. We have the John Peterson Scholarship. And we also have open enrollment. So it is still my understanding that Lakota can accept or not accept open enrollment. Is that correct? So if that is correct, then
Yeah, we do
Lakota
not
can turn
We do
away.
not have open enrollment.
So that means that Lakota can say no to certain students, right? You don't have to take certain students.
Only those
Just
that live
because you
outside
have
of our
open
district
enrollment.
boundaries.
Yeah.
So we cannot
Correct,
say no
correct.
to any student within our district boundary.
We have to.
Correct. And so for instance, here's a case where, and I'm really actually hoping this does happen, but there is a charter school in North Carolina that only accepts children that have a similar autism scholarship or similar to our John Peterson scholarship. So that school has chosen, because of the increased funding with those scholarships, to purposefully try to recruit those students. And they have made a business model that works very well for them. And so I suspect the community and the desire, the needs, the drive, whatever the need is in the community, that the schools will eventually adjust and meet those needs accordingly. Sort of like, I mean, even the Schilling School does, right? So they will attract a certain child or a student that they have decided that they want to recruit.
So just to clarify, this is Dr. Whiteley, Superintendent. I just want to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Eddy asked. As a public entity, when a student within our district enrolls, we have every obligation and should educate that child. We cannot say no. However, my question is, when that same child leaves our district and goes to enroll in a private school, I just want to be super clear, I'm hearing and understanding, that private school can say, no, thank you. Is that accurate?
To the
What
best
I'm
of my
going
knowledge,
to
that
say,
is correct.
Thank you.
but I'm also going to say that a parent would not put their child in a school that doesn't meet their child's needs, right? So
Correct, but when
they
that
wouldn't
parent brings
want-
the child to public education, I have no choice but to educate that child as I should, because every child deserves an education.
But there are other schools possibly that are private schools that might be able to provide for that child. So it's not just one or the other. It could be one or the other or the other or the other or the other that can provide. And the public school could provide. One school may not be able to provide because it's too small and it only offers, 5 grades, and it just doesn't. But it's not probably because they're rejecting the child. It's because they don't have the actual ability to service that child. But also the parent who loves their child will put their child where arguably that child is going to learn best. And that may be in the public school, which I would think, Dr. Whiteley, you would be proud of. So, and I'm sure that you are.
And Ms. Gross, I guess that's
And,
where.
and Dr. Whiteley, if I can piggyback on that, it goes back to what I said earlier. One of the fundamental problems I have with the voucher program is we are not asking public schools to compete on a level playing field. And I have some thoughts and some ideas in terms of how to make the playing field level, and would be happy to meet with you guys offline to go over some of those ideas. I mean, one simple idea, we know for a fact, and I'm going to make the numbers up. Don't hold me that these numbers are right, but we know for a fact that it costs more to teach a student with severe disabilities. I'm going to make a number up. Let's say that cost is $50,000 a year, and maybe 20, I don't know, compared to a student who is comes from a family with loving mom and a loving dad who put education at a high level. You know, it costs a lot less to educate those students. So do we somehow have to say, hey, we need to put a weight on the cost of educating the student compared to just a blanket cost for all students? I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but I certainly think it's something worth exploring. Now, the risk to the public schools, if we do that and we say, all right, let's put 40,000 on that student with a high disability, the risk you run is the private sector is going to develop a school to focus on that and continue to take those dollars away from public schools. But I'm not pleased with the fairness. I'm pleased with the voucher program, but not the overall fairness. And if you guys want to work on that, I'm happy to sit down and share some other thoughts I have on that and listen to any thoughts you guys may have on that.
And Senator Lang, I appreciate and would be more than willing to engage in that conversation because I am a parent. And so I absolutely believe in parent choice, and every parent wants what's best for their child. And so kind of just to reiterate or kind of put my thought in summary is, I guess I struggle that a parent can choose a private school, but a private school might not choose their child. And so that is where
That's fair feedback. That is fair criticism.
Right. And so I think I would love to continue that conversation because I do definitely think that, to use your words, there is a handcuffing there that is just a grapple for me. So again, would love to engage in that conversation.
I knew we could find some common ground.
Mrs. Casper has a question. Go ahead.
It's not as much of a question as a statement, Senator Lang, about how we should be embarrassed that we are the fourth most vouchers in the state. But in doing research for this meeting, out of the 2,300 vouchers that we gave out last year, 2,000 of those students were never intending to come here. And like someone pointed out earlier, we don't know the reason for that. It might be athletics. It might be a religious aspect. So we can't assume that all 2,000 people were just disappointed in Lakota and were fleeing, because we don't know that to be true. Because in doing my research and going on private schools, Catholic schools, charter school websites today, one of the very first thing that pops up on every single website is, let me tell you how to get a voucher. So I don't think that it's as much of a reflection on Lakota as you would lead us to believe in those 2,000, because we don't know those 2,000 students were never intending to come here.
You know, my only pushback to that, hang on, let me respond to that. My only pushback to that statement would be every public school district in the state faces the exact same thing, every single one. You're the 7th largest school district, maybe the 8th, I forget, I believe 7th. So your fair share, you should be the 7th largest amount of voucher programs. The fact that you're the 4th says more parents in Lakota are fleeing Lakota at a greater rate than many of your peer big school districts. I think that evidence is pretty clear.
But that they're not fleeing, Senator.
Okay.
They never were intending to come here.
Well, and another
I'm not sure that is a fair statement. It could be, and I'd like to do a deep dive on that.
Yeah, there's an interesting map that's put together that shows access to private schools in different areas as well. And Lakota and our general area has significantly more private school options than most schools in the state. And I also think that that has an impact, is access, availability, and family tradition. Are there students that certainly we did not meet the exact needs of and they've chosen to do other things? Absolutely. And will that continue? Absolutely. But I just think we have to look at that there's certainly a balance of both, and access certainly impacts where we fall in the state with our significant number of high quality private institutions that we have in this area. I have a last question.
Casper?
What's that?
I received some information regarding your low-income students. It has been brought to my attention that under our voucher, if the students meet less than 200%, the federal poverty level, that they cannot be charged tuition. So that is part of, my understanding is that is part of our voucher program.
Is that the base the original EdChoice versus the EdChoice expansion?
That is our
And
current
that's just
EdChoice
the-
voucher program.
Yeah,
So
I think
if they
that's the
make
original
200% under the federal, under 200%, the federal poverty level, they cannot be charged extra tuition beyond our voucher.
Yeah, and of EdChoice, we have 17 of our kids out of the 2,440 that are taking vouchers that are on the original EdChoice. One last question for me, at least, is there has been legislation in the past that has had provisions for more accountability and transparency of where both the money goes and performance, and each of those bills have had those provisions stripped. Do you know why those were taken off those bills? And is there an interest, and would you be willing to champion adding accountability and transparency provisions to future bills?
I do not know the answer as to why those were removed.
And I do not know the answer either. And, you know, there are some schools that are built on the premise that they don't want to teach to a standardized test. I still want to give parents the opportunity, if they think that school is in their best interest, to take advantage of that. So I don't know that I certainly would, I would not champion it, but I would support what would be some reasonable requests, but to try to put everybody on a level playing field when different schools have different models, I don't think that's something that I could be supportive of.
All right.
Okay.
It-
Okay, I want to make a statement.
Okay.
In my research, I just on the flip side of what Ms. Casper said, in my research, I was able to talk to some parents that chose just to take their kids to private school. Just like you said before, we have to do a better job of focusing more on education and students' achievements, and try as much as possible to remove that notion that it's a public school. We're going to focus a lot on social issues. The social issues are the issues of the public school, and that is why some parents choose not to even bring their kids to public school. I strongly believe that this voucher is an opportunity for public schools to begin to focus more and prove who they are and what they can do. That way, if the students' achievement is seen in their reports, we're holding our teachers accountable to ensure that they focus on the curriculum, and we reduce social issues both in our meetings and in everywhere in the school premises and property. Invite parents to come and see our property to see that, look, the concern they have on social issues is not here in Lakota. If we can proudly do that, of course, that notion and the idea people have is going to be clean, and probably we're going to have students come to our school. One of the things I was told is, I know somebody that had his kid go to a different school. He was in Lakota before, but he moved his kid to a different school. And I asked him, okay, from the voucher, you're not paying, the voucher doesn't pay the entire tuition for your child. So why did you take your child to a different school? And this is what I heard. You think I want to spend more money somewhere else if Lakota was okay, or if the public schools were okay? And I think it might not necessarily be Lakota, but the public school generally is being seen as a place where everything goes. So I believe that this voucher issue is going to help us prove who we are and continue to get our students stay in our schools. And that will help in reducing the number of students that we lose. I don't know how many we're losing in Lakota, but I believe that that is going to help us compete and be in where we need to be as a public school system. Thank you.
All right, we certainly appreciate your time, and I think this went a little longer than we anticipated with the Q&A, so I appreciate you sticking around with us and also the offers to have additional dialogue. And I think we will look forward to moving forward with that and being able to continue the conversation. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thanks
appreciate
for having us, and I look forward to the follow-up.
Thank you.
Yes, same
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks you
Bye.
guys for all you do.
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
We
as
appreciate
well.
Thank you.
All right.
So that was a healthy dialogue, right? And I believe that that is the beauty of education, right? Public, private, whatever it may be, is that you have dialogues and you view different perspectives and you come to your own belief or consensus, right? And so I think that our next step then is to talk about kind of the original proposal that was put forth to us on March 4th, which is about joining the litigation called Vouchers Hurt Ohio. Do we want to do that? But then I think even before deciding on that, I think there was also the offer or suggestion from the association that this be a joint effort, meaning that we would partner with the association in the financial aspects that are tied to investing in the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit. And so for me, I think that's an important partnership, right? And when you talk about education in general, when an association, a governance team, a board of education can partner, I think that shows a very united front. And so I think just as we view that lawsuit aspect, for me, that is in partnership, that we do that in partnership and talk about the financial lift that requires from both entities. But I think those are the kind of the discussion on the table is how we feel, and ultimately will lead to kind of a vote of, do we want to join that Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit in conjunction with a partnership of the association financially.
So does anyone want to share their thoughts on where they stand after this conversation of, we wanted to have this input prior to bringing that forward?
Can I ask a quick clarifying question, Dr. Whiteley?
Mhm.
Maybe you know the answer to this. Can the voucher expansion program pay for homeschooling or online schools? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It cannot pay for homeschooling, but it can pay, depending on the structure of the school and it's online, there are some abilities to be like in hybrid models and things of that nature that payment can go towards, depending on how the school's IRN, kind of like in our world, how that is structured.
Do we know, excuse me, do we know,
And I'll double, triple check that just to make sure, but the homeschool piece, I know for sure not.
But there
I'm
has
just
been
curious. I'm just asking
conversation.
because if the premise of this is for student choice or for
Mhm.
parent choice, are we expanding this to all parent choice, or are we only looking at public and private schools?
And I do think that has come up in some discussions even that I have heard, is particularly with the, COVID changed some things. Homeschooling has continued to expand in some ways. I think that has come up as part of the discussion. But again, I will look, those bills are long, so I will just make sure to
Yeah.
kind of resurface that and double
Please.
check my facts on that. Mhm.
Thank you.
do we know if the voucher, for instance, is 6166 for K-8, and one of these schools that I looked up today was 5,000 for a year, do they get the 6166 just to the
I don't
total?
know. I don't think they get they don't put that in their pocket and take that with them. No, I think they get the cap of what that school
Of what the
costs
school
them. Mhm.
charges? Thanks.
Yeah, and it appeared that as I've looked into it more today, also the funding that they would receive is a monthly funding. Like another example of that are our vocational schools. They get that once a month, where we get ours tracked twice a month, and we get our distributions 2 times a month, so that it tries to be a little more accurate with that attendance level.
When I look at the the question that's before us, and then compare that to the conversation we just had, I want to make it clear that I don't think any of us have said that it's a competition with our partners in the community. When I look at schools like CCS and Mother Teresa, these are great schools that provide great education. And I haven't heard anyone on the board articulate that we don't think parents should be able to take their kids there. I think when I look at the data that we talked about, what concerns me is, and especially in regards to this particular step that we're looking to take, when the state is funding our schools at about $2,800 per student, but when you look at these schools, they're funding $5,300 at CCS, or it's $4,186 when you look at all the providers within Butler County. Yes, that's just the state portion, but we've gone to our taxpayers and asked them to fund our schools, and they have chosen to do that. My concern is creating this, having more of the state fund more dollars to those when they're not asking for that same support locally. So when you look at some of the stipulations about control of the dollars, I think this is creating a thing where they are getting a disproportionate portion of state dollars. And then when you look at the effects that we've seen on this, so I know during our discussions, there was a lot of the state data, but when you look at Lakota schools specifically, right? We have, first off, our enrollment continued to grow as people took advantage of these vouchers at basically the same rate. So going back to the fact that most of these students have never stepped foot in Lakota, this isn't a fleeing of our schools. This isn't us trying to keep students. It's whether or not people are getting money that they had already decided to take this for. And then, we talk about some of the stats that are disturbing. I specifically asked questions of legislators because I was hoping to understand what are they trying to get out of this beyond parent choice, because what we're looking at is some very concerning trends. And when I look at Lakota data, Lakota is 60% white, non-Hispanic, but when we look at who's taking advantage of these vouchers, 83% are white, non-Hispanic. When I look at what we measure as economically disadvantaged, 68% of our district is non-disadvantaged versus 91% who are taking advantage of this. So fundamentally, you are getting white, upper class people who are participating in this and being allowed this choice and taking advantage of this, which is causing systemic issues with what we're looking to do here. And then again, I really appreciate you guys digging in and pulling the data on performance. The fact that we're 4.5 stars proves that the great work that our teachers have done, who are asking us to take this step, we are providing quality education. So this narrative that students are fleeing Lakota because they aren't getting what they need here, I think is inaccurate. So I just want to make sure we consider all of that as we go through this. And there's a lot of talk about money following the child, and cute little analogies of a backpack. But fundamentally, most taxpayers don't have kids in any school in Lakota currently, and they're still paying into the education system. And when you look at Westchester alone, the median income is $94,000. So if you look at no deductions, if they're just paying their income tax, that's $2,230 right there. And then we have these providers that are getting $41,000, $53,000. The issue isn't money following the child. It's how much money is going to certain stakeholders. And I don't think we found an answer for that. So I just wanted to state all of that my concerns, especially when you look at the 5 counts of what we're looking to talk about.
I asked technology to put slide number 8 back up. Slide number 8 is one that reflects our data. You will see that between fiscal years 23 and 24, we actually had increased in enrollment, and that's when the Ed Choice expansion came on. And that shows the very, very large increase there. Then when we took the dip down going from 24 to 25, I think it's definitely worth noting that we have a master facility project we've been talking a lot about, and due to that and trying to maintain the class sizes and the growth within our buildings, we did reduce that down to only educating our Lakota students that are residents here. And 200 of the 400 dip came from removing the open enrolled students. And that was not an easy decision made by anybody, because we are all programmed not to turn any students away. So that should be noted with that.
I think for me, and I said it to Senator Lang, and I'll say it again, I'm a parent. I believe in parent choice, and I believe you should have the right to choose where you educate your child. On the flip side of that, I'm struggling with a comment that I can't champion for a level playing field. Because as public entities, we weren't asked to have a level playing field. And what I mean by that is the state themselves, which our legislators represent, dictated to us so that all public schools could be compared apples to apples, that we have state tests, that we have common teacher evaluations, that we have a common finance reporting, that we have a common standards or curriculum in this state, and that we have a common state report card so that we are all on the level playing field and can compare apples to apples to apples. To say that we can't champion for all schools, private or public, to have that same accountability and have that same level playing field so that parents can really make a solid choice built on data and their choice, that is where I struggle with the accountability of the voucher piece.
Well, and I think someone made the comment, I don't know if it was Senator Lang or Representative Gross, that some parents don't want to take their kids to a school that requires testing or teaching to the test. Well, guess what? We would love to not have state testing.
Or teacher evaluations,
don't
or
get
finance
that.
reporting, or state report cards.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But we do, and we're held accountable to that, to our public and our taxpayers, as we should be. But I just think to say that we can't champion for all to have a level playing field is a struggle. And I do think that choice that I asked very pointedly to both of our representatives about, we educate all, and private schools, they don't have to do that, right? They have a different level of expectation. And so I think it's just a different educational philosophy.
For me, I think, like you said, giving the parents the choice is paramount. I believe that there's no perfect program. No matter what we have, there's still going to be loopholes. There are still going to be areas that we will not be able to meet everybody's need. But I also strongly believe that this is giving education back to the parents, which curtail government interference, government overreach. I believe the reason why public school is struggling, like I said in my statement before, is government overreach. Because if legislators Senator Representative Gross said, 68% on average is what this voucher is based on, which means that the state of Ohio, 68% of parents said, we prefer to give us the choice to educate our kids the way we want. So if we have to test our students, that is an opportunity for us to prove to parents that if we do well, they will bring their kids to our school district. But if we're not tested, that is where we'll say there's no equal playing field. But if we're tested, we can prove that we can do it as well. Who wants to pay more money? Who wants to waste their money if they can get something better? And if we're the alternative that they can get better, why not us? So like I said, for me, I did a lot of research, and I knew a lot of things that were even shared here. After listening to the presentation on March 4th, thank you. You first of all requested that we need to hear from our legislators. And I piggyback to it because that was what was in my mind. And I relate with a lot of them, apart from this state, from our district, even in the state level. I know many. I asked a lot of questions on personal level. Okay, so I knew that if we come here, a lot of things are going to be clear. And there's nothing that was said here that was new to me, because I knew that this is a perfect opportunity for the public school system to show that we can do it. They're funding the child, not the system, which is good. So that's my take to it. And I believe that if we can do it, Dr. Lawley came here within 1 year. We moved from 3-star to 4.5-star. Because if we hold our teachers accountable, we hold everybody accountable, we can do it. Student achievement should be our focus. I believe we can do it.
When we,
But, Go ahead.
Can I make one
Go.
statement to that first, please? How can our parents make informed decisions if they don't have the data to do an apples to apples comparison?
That is
So
where
we're
that-
asking our parents to make a decision between a private and public school without giving them the tools to make an informed decision. I mean, we're constantly being asked, make our decisions based on data. But at the same time, we're asking parents to make this decision, it feels like more based on emotion than based on data.
Okay, I believe we got a lot of data that conflicted to what we have.
I'm talking
Do not-
about performance data of students' performance
We have no
at
data.
a school, a private school versus the public school.
Okay, if our data continue to improve, we already have data they don't have. That is where they can make their decision. Really, I thought public schools are not doing well, but from what I'm seeing, they're doing great. So why spend more money taking my child to another school? Because the voucher doesn't pay 100% of their tuition anyway. So they are paying extra. The reason why they want to pay extra is because they believe public schools are not delivering. And like I said too, there are so many social issues that are very prominent in public schools. So if we take the public school, change their focus, and we remove all those social issues, everything is about education. Definitely, parents are going to bring their kids here. I have asked a lot of parents whose concern is, you know what? I don't want to go to public school because of social issues.
So I appreciate all of the intentions and the ideology that's behind the expansion of Ed Choice. In fact, I don't know if I was one of the people surveyed in that statistic that Jennifer Gross or Representative Gross cited, but I'm in favor of Ed Choice. So, but when I look at the expansion of Ed Choice and I look at $1 billion program in the state of Ohio that my legislators can't articulate any outcome outside of choice, and there's a lack of reporting, a lack of transparency, and then I see the effect on education, that's how it's being rolled out. You know, I look back at, I mean, we are looking at potentially joining a lawsuit against the state of Ohio. That's what's before us. This is a very serious step that we are potentially taking, and I take that very seriously. But when I look back at the school boards of the 90s who looked at, despite all the intentions, the reality of school funding in Ohio was unconstitutional and not working. And it took that lawsuit to actually get things to change. I look at this and I champion the intentions, but the reality is, I just cited all the reality. It's causing segregation in our district. It's causing class divides. It is not necessarily guaranteeing any better performance than what we're seeing today. So when I look at what we're looking at here tonight, you know, I'm in favor of taking that step of championing forcing our legislatures and our state to take a harder look at Ed Choice and finding a way to implement it in a way that is constitutional, that does deliver on the objectives, instead of just a bunch of wishes and would like to haves.
Kelly, wait, Kelly had wanted to speak before, so I'm gonna let her go, then I'll come back to you.
I forgot.
Oh.
So come back to me.
Okay.
Can I jump in and say
Yep.
something? I want to kind of address the academic success of our school district, and that being the reason that these decisions are being made. I do not believe that that is the reason that these students are choosing to go to a private school. With 4.5 stars in our district, we are academically successful. We have high quality teachers. Our children are getting excellent educations in Lakota. And if we're going to talk about, you know, talking with people in the community, I did spend some time asking people who send their children to private schools, why do you send your child to a private school? And would you do it anyway if you were not provided a voucher? And every single one of them said yes, they would do it anyway, even if they were not provided a voucher. And so to me, that raises another question that I haven't seen in our data yet that I would love to kind of dig into at some point. And that is enrollment in private schools up? Because our enrollment is pretty steady despite all of these students going to private schools. So when you look at the number of students, are they making the choice between the two? And are more students leaving Lakota to go to a private school, even if they've never stepped foot in our school, than they have in the past? And if their enrollment is the same, I think that just speaks directly to what these parents of students in private schools are saying, and that is they would send them there anyway. I guess the part that I really struggle with is I do believe in parent choice, and I do believe that parents should 100% have the ability to make the decision for their children on where they attend school. However, I don't feel like this bill is doing that. It is not parent choice. If a parent chooses to apply for the voucher to send their child to Baden, and Baden looks at it and says, no, your child can't come here, that's eliminated the parent choice. And so I really just don't believe that this is written in a way that is best for families and best for students. Take the funding part aside. There's a lot of unfair parts of this program. There's the fact that they're offering vouchers to high-income families who would have paid the dollar out of their pocket anyway to send their child there. Instead, they're going to take money from the state level to do it. The fact that they can turn away children with special needs or our gifted students takes away the ability for the parent to have the choice. There's not academic accountability that is connected to the funding of these schools in any way like there is for us. And really, the funding of how they use those dollars is not reported in any way either. And so to me, what that's saying is this really isn't about parent choice. And it's really not about academic success or accountability. And so I guess that's where my issues lie with this bill.
Well, it is I remember, it is for me, the whole transparency piece as well. You don't know how they're using the money. We don't know why they're saying no. And I've said this from the get-go, it isn't parental choice. It is the school's choosing. And as far as schools, people not want to Mr. Adie's point, not wanting to come to Lakota because of the social issues, I have relatives in private schools in Missouri, and they're very much talk about social issues. They very much allow kids to discuss the outside world and what is going on in a respectful, teaching them a respectful environment and how to have respectful conversations. So I don't think that is the reason. Maybe they don't like the social issues discussed. Maybe it's not their thing, but it's not that it's not being discussed in private schools.
Well, and I also think that Julie made a very valid point, right? We are blessed to live in a region that has ample opportunities for education in public and private schools. Okay. From someone who grew up in southwestern Kentucky and the closest private school was 35 minutes away, people really didn't even view that as an option, right? Because you had to get there 35 minutes away or 45 minutes away. So when we moved to Ohio, I remember going, whoa, like there's a lot of private schools, there's a lot of public, there's like a lot of schools. So I think the fact that, yes, you know, when you say we should be 7th because we're the 7th largest school district, that we should be 7th in Ohio because of vouchers, because of just of our location in the Cincinnati area, that other parts of our state do not have that luxury to be in that proximity. I do think that is a little bit of a game changer, and probably you see that increase to the 4th level, not because of our education deficiencies, but more so just because of proximity, location, and availability to families of what is around us. And so I think that's an important piece that you brought up that I don't think should be lost, because other areas of our state don't have that same level of access.
Yeah. And we ourselves have been disappointed in some areas of the class sizes for early childhood. That's some of the reasons I believe people choose, because we don't have the capacity right now because we just don't have the space. So I think, again, there's a myriad of issues that cause people to look at things. But with what we're teaching our kids, I listened to the governor's State of the State address today, and he talked about how important it is that we teach our students critical thinking skills, bringing up different topics, having healthy debates, looking for actual evidence and facts. And again, I hope that we continue to teach all of our students how to be critical thinkers, not what to think, but expose them to different ideas so they can use critical evidence in order to support theirs. As an English teacher, I'm sure you spent a lot of time teaching our students what that looked like.
So, I think, again, to just kind of bring us back around, I think our final point right now is to look at, and I have in front of you what the lawsuit's 5 counts are, right? And just to summarize so that all can see or hear, it's count 1 is the creation of one or more schools of uncommon schools is unconstitutional. Count 2 is that lawmakers have failed to adequately fund a thorough and efficient system. Count 3 is that private schools make segregation in public schools worse. And it goes on to talk about public dollars while applying litmus tests to pick and choose their students based on different criteria. Count 4, we actually referenced in our discussion with the legislation about no religious or other sect shall have any other exclusive right to or control of any part of the school funds of the state. And then count 5 is that Ohio citizens hold all power under the Ohio Constitution. So with that, that is the decision of our Board of Education, is to decide whether we join the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit. There are a number of schools, as we saw on our March 4th, that have joined that lawsuit. And so again, we would be looking to partner with the association. I think that is an important distinction as we vote, is that vote to enter a lawsuit would be in partnership with the association in some of that financial lift. That would be an important caveat, an important stipulation of us joining that lawsuit, because that was part of the original discussion.
Can I say something?
Mhm.
Yeah, Ms. Casper, I appreciate something you said, and I want to touch on it. Transparency issue, stating that the private schools do not, account for the money that is given to them. Okay, that is where parents, if they are not delivering, the outcome is not meeting the needs of the parents. That's where the parents know that I'm going to move my kid to a place where I can get a better education. So the issue of transparency, I don't think should be an issue. It should be an issue of whether they're delivering the outcome or not. And then on the segregation, as is mentioned here, I thought we were told here that did not encourage segregation.
That is what the legislators stated.
Yes, and she has a stat for that. So
So I have our stats, which clearly show, and I'll repeat them again.
no, I know
Lakota,
the fifth,
right? So I'm not
white,
saying,
white.
I'm saying the effect, right? The effect is that we have 60% of our school district is white, non-Hispanic. When you look at who's taking advantage of the vouchers, it's 83%.
Okay.
So 23% more representation of white, non-Hispanic within vouchers than that. So I'm not saying whether there's intention, but the reality and the effect is, I grew up, so in the 80s in Florida, I was still part of a busing program in elementary school to desegregate that had started in the 60s, because the economic situations were such that if you still went by neighborhoods, you would have completely segregated schools. So I had to bus clear across town to correct the effect of what happened. It's not because somebody was trying to do it. It was just the economic realities that were happening there. So when you look at the economic incentives that are being put in place here and who's actually able to take advantage of these, because they're wealthy, it's causing a different outcome and a misrepresentation.
That is where I do not understand. How is the level of, I thought with this program, it even out for everybody. That's what I see.
Intentions are
because-
great, but the reality is we're seeing who's utilizing it.
So how does that segregate? Because you are saying more white people and Hispanics enjoy the program more.
The
Is
effect,
that not a good thing?
N-
It's a, even
what I'm saying is the
playing
effect,
field.
just like if
It's
any
to give
school,
everybody even playing field. I pay taxes in this school district. Whatever is shared in the district, I have the right to be part of it, to partake of it. So you are saying that more white take advantage of it because, and that is not a good thing?
I think if any of these schools were saying that they were only accepting white students, there'd be a lot of people concerned about it. If the effect of what's happening is people who are taking advantage of the voucher program are mainly white people, you get the same effect. So whether it's an explicit policy that's put in place or an effect of how it's netting out, I have concerns. And I don't fault the individuals who are taking advantage of the system. What I'm faulting is how the program is being administered is causing ill effects. And it's great to talk about free markets and competition, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a public good, and anybody who studies economics should understand that, and a major market failure, which is that the education I buy does not benefit just me. It benefits our entire community. And so I want schools that have the representation of our community, whether they're private schools, whether they're non-chartered, whether they're home schools. I want that same representation because there's a social benefit to all of our community being represented. And this notion that just because somebody wants to do something and it can cause ill effects to the rest of us, that's why that comparison in economics is wrong to apply to public education. And I get really irritated about saying all of this is a competition over students. I want these schools to thrive. I want ed choice to thrive. If for no other reason, it would take some of the pressure off of us to have to build new schools. But the problem is it's creating situations that are not suggesting student outcomes are better. They're not suggesting that we're getting representation at these schools. None of this is supported. There's these ideas that are being thrown out and comparisons to economics that are just unsound and unfounded.
So with that, are we ready to take a vote on the lawsuit piece? Or does anybody feel we need additional? Because one of the things, I think one of the reasons that we had this discussion is we wanted to know where our legislators stand on vouchers, right? And I think we got a resounding, we believe in it, right? In fact, to quote, one, vouchers are here to stay and we will look at financing both. Another one said, clearly all were about freedom of choice rooted in that, but I think it was very clear that they support vouchers, not only in its current state, but would be looking to continue that and possibly expand that while supporting public education as well. But it would be a both model, not a just public education piece. So with that, I think that was our impetus. Where do our legislators stand? We know that. Have we engaged in dialogue? I think we've done that, really good, rich dialogue. And so I know we all have our various opinions on vouchers and whether we want to join the Vouchers Against Hurt Ohio lawsuit. And so in conjunction with our association in that financial partnership. So I think that is the vote that would be at hand.
I will say for me personally, at this point, I have a bit of a question of if we take that step now, or if we see if there's any willingness to address any of our concerns before we take that step. And again, I'm happy to do either.
It did sound like all three legislators were willing to continue to engage, perhaps even bring us more into the conversation, even at the state level. We can become data heavy for sure, right, in this conversation. So I think that is certainly a viable option, is to wait. The last conversation we had with our guest last month was, this is an ongoing thing. People join at different times for different reasons, for different purposes. And so I don't think it is a one and done opportunity. This is something that you, again, contribute to yearly. And so if we want to pause and just watch our current legislation and do that, we certainly could do that, and to continue to see what that dialogue and partnership looks like with our legislation. That is an option.
I was very pleasantly surprised that all three of them seemed very willing to sit down.
On very short notice. And I will say that we asked them about
I
a week
mean,
ago.
no, I mean,
So I
willing
do
to sit-
commend them for coming to the.
I
table for
I
that.
was surprised that they were willing to sit down and talk with us further beyond tonight. All three of them saying that was surprising to me. I also heard all of them say that they believe there are problems.
Right.
Not just I want to sit down and hear what you have to say, but I believe there are problems with this bill. They all were in agreement of that. Whether they agree that our problems are the same or our issues are the same is left for that discussion, at a future date. But I was pleasantly surprised that they were willing to
And we
further
didn't
that
really give
conversation.
Representative Hall a chance to answer because he
Oh,
was already
sure.
gone by the would you champion question. So I would like
Like to
to
hear that.
maybe on Friday. talk to him about that.
I feel like the two aren't mutually exclusive. I would hope that we could continue to partner with
Both.
our legislatures no matter what steps we take.
Thank you.
I don't feel like this is dating in high school. And if I decide to vote on this, then no, we can't walk down the same hall together anymore. No pun on our representative's name. So I feel like we could take whatever action tonight.
Yeah.
And regardless of that outcome, I would still champion those discussions with our legislators.
So I'm hearing, again, I can request a motion. It can be.
I think you can request a motion. You can certainly request a motion, and a no might be, I'm not in support, period, of just joining that lawsuit, or I'm just not in support at this time because I would like to continue to partner and continue the dialogue. So I
Could
think
also
there's,
table it.
Can
and we could also table it.
That would be my suggestion.
Hold on, let me get it right. What are we doing now?
So we can,
We're deciding what
We're
we're
trying
doing.
to decide.
we can take a vote and you vote yes to join the lawsuit or no, not to join the lawsuit for whatever reason that may be. And if you want to state that, you can, or you don't have to. Or we can table this, spend some more time on it, marinate, that's my word, marinate in it a little bit more, continue to have that dialogue, maybe get some of that data that they're going to send us and really dig into the data that they have, because you can get data from different sources, just as Mr. Zink said. So we might want to just peruse that and then bring that back to the table for discussion at a different time. So I think it's either take the vote now or table it, look at some of the data that they might send us, continue to engage in the dialogue, and then bring it back for future vote.
Can I ask a question about that? So when this was presented to us last week, there was a date attached to it that they needed a decision by.
I
What
wrote
is that
down.
date? What does that date
I think
mean?
that was,
I did write that date
It was-
down.
I think it's tomorrow, but I
It's
think that's for if the association was
Mhm.
going to move forward at
Yeah,
this
that's
point.
just
So it would
association.
cause them to have a.
And I
delay
think
as
that's
well.
my hesitancy to table this. I think, look at the turnout, this is our best attended meeting. I think
Quite a
since
long
I've been on
time.
the board. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And caring so much. Second, our association had an ask to us, and I think we need to honor that request. So even if it does, I don't like the idea of tabling it because they had a certain timeline that they were looking at, and I want to honor that request.
Things to keep in mind with the rules of order. If you table, then it has to take action at the very next meeting, which would be Monday, or then it falls off the table, or you have the other option, you could table it indefinitely,
Mhm.
which then it just stays in this folder until somebody
Until we make a decision.
pulls it back in. So we have one that's been sitting in there forever. So that's why I carry that. So if you just table this, we would take action on it at the next meeting, or if not, then this would become a moot point.
For me, if we table it, I don't want to table it for a long period of time. I want to get the data that we need and what we think we need. I don't want this to be like, how do we table it? So if we don't take action next week, it just stays on the table till we do take
No,
action,
it
right?
has to be tabled indefinitely for it to stay on the table.
Well, or you would table it again at the next meeting to then carry it to the following meeting.
We
If
doesn't
you
even
didn't
make.
take
I think we
action
knew
at
how to
all.
do this. We had to do it
It
somewhere.
doesn't make
It
any
has been a
difference
little
anyway.
while, but,
Yeah. It's Monday is how many days out? It doesn't make any difference.
and
If
they're
we
going to
don't-
share the information and we'll.
I think
share
the
that.
question for us that we need to consider when we talk about tabling something is there any chance that the data we're provided will change our opinion on how we feel about these 5 counts?
Mhm.
If that data will change our opinion, potentially, then we need to table it. If that doesn't make a difference, we want the data for our informational knowledge, then I think we go ahead and vote on it today. And I agree with Doug. We have all of these people here because they care about the future of this bill in one way or another. And I think that we owe it to them to take a vote tonight, unless you feel strongly that the data could change your opinion.
All right. I will open up for a motion to join the Ohio Coalition for Equity and Adequacy of School Funding. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion, since we haven't talked about this at all yet tonight? Is there anyone else who'd like to say anything prior to calling for a vote? Hearing none, Adam, please call the roll.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. French,
Yes.
Mr. D,
No.
Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Uh, I'm actually going with no tonight. So, but yes. Do I have a motion to approve adjournment?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Adam, please call the roll.
Mr. D,
Yes.
Ms. Casper,
Yes.
Ms. French,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
At 8:24.
Thank you.